Welcome to the Uncredible Podcast. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. Today, let's start out by looking at this week on the Substack. Our first article was Wednesday, and it was called Collecting Chips, Betting Against the Quiet. In this article, I take the time to take you back to, I think it was like 2003, 2004. I think 2004 is when I started at Frito-Lay. And one of my first jobs outside of living with my parents, my wife and I got married. I had a couple of, side gigs, temp jobs, data entry, things like that. But when I got into working at Frito-Lay, that's when I really considered myself kind of on my own. But it was one of my first interactions with what I would consider to be bullies outside of like childhood, like high school, junior high. You've got these people who you would consider bullies. And that doesn't really translate as you get past high school and you get into the workforce. It takes a little bit of a different form. And in this article, Collecting Chips, I share a little bit about how I started to completely unconsciously file away things that people were doing. And this was one of the earliest situations where I found myself collecting chips, seeing people do things and tucking it away so that when they later came back to me, I would be like, hey, wait a second. There's this inconsistency in your life. And I used that against one of I don't think he was my manager. He was just like a maintenance leader. This guy was watching me, keeping an eye on me. And I don't know if I probably looked young and I probably looked, I certainly wasn't threatening to this guy, but he was ex-military. Maybe he just had a lot of angst built up from being out of the military and now he was just in the regular workforce. But in that article, I share a little bit about my interactions with this individual and how over the course of a couple of weeks, probably a couple of months, I collected chips. I watched what he was doing. He watched what I was doing. And then I finally had to kind of cash those chips in. And so I encourage you to listen to that article or go on Substack and read that article a little bit. I'm going to talk about Uncredible readings, and I'll share a clip from that article this week. So Collecting Chips was Wednesday. And then Thursday, we had our throwback article, which was Death by Overwork, Effort Without Purpose. And basically, in that particular article, it's one of my favorite articles, and it's never gotten a whole lot of people to read it. It used to be called Karoshi, Death by Overwork, because it's where I share this principle that I discovered of Karoshi. And it's a principle in Japan where they came up with this term, and they were dying at work, or in some cases they were killing themselves because of the work. But the idea it became a real problem, and they actually have a term for it. And I discovered it when I was working, 6-7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, and just basically I got to this point where I just felt like I was killing myself at work. And in that article, I share how I changed my mindset at work from looking at things that were like mandatory that I had to do and flipping those around and turning them into things that I wanted to do. And what I get at in that article is when you're required or forced to do something, you have a tendency to really become miserable in whatever that is. Like if somebody is forcing you to do something that you, quote, don't want to do, it's miserable. It drains the life out of you. However, on the flip side of that, if you're doing something you want to do, that work doesn't feel like anything. And it really comes down to putting forth effort with a purpose. And when you allow a job or a family member or friend or somebody to get you involved with something that you don't want to do, that will drain your life. But if you're doing something and you want to do it and you can find purpose in that thing, all of a sudden you're energized to do it. And so basically what I share in that article, which I think is important, is work itself, putting forth effort, long hours, hard days, in and of itself won't kill you. It's doing that when you don't want to do it. And I don't mean it's a difficult balance, because sometimes you on a grand scheme want to accomplish something, and this task gets you to that goal. And so you may not like today want to do it, but you understand in the long view, it's something you need to do. And so you do want to do it in some way, shape, or form. But when somebody comes along and says, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, and it doesn't connect with any of your life's purposes, that is really life draining and life sucking. And it really works a toll on your mental state. And so highly encourage you to check out that. It's one of my favorite articles that I've written. It hasn't gotten a whole lot of readership. I don't really care about that, but I do think it's a helpful article. It certainly helped me understand and embrace some of the difficult things that we have to do, and even in things that I formerly didn't want to do, right? Like, let's say you have a job where they have mandatory overtime. It's very easy to just on a weekly basis hear that you have mandatory overtime and just be like, oh, I was going to do this with my family, or I was going to do that this weekend. Instead, if you change your mindset and say, hey, I'm trying to earn money for my family, I want to go on a vacation. All of a sudden, when they say it's mandatory overtime, you're not upset at all. You want that overtime and you want to do it. So this week we had Collecting Chips and Death by Overwork, two good articles worth looking into. Now, next week, and by the way, I can't tell you how excited I am that I'm ahead on these articles. It's something that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to be ahead on these articles, but I've just never really, and keep in mind, I've been writing blogs, articles, things like that. I've been doing this for, off and on for a decade, and never really gotten a good habit of getting ahead on articles. And so I'm very excited about that. But next week we have an article called The Tears I Caused When Silence Speaks Too Loudly. And listen, if you have kids and you have a tendency to get emotional, this article will hit home. Basically, I don't want to get into it too much because I'll give a recap next week when we have the podcast and this article actually comes out. But let me put it this way. I made an error in judgment in disciplining one of my kids. Nothing bad. Well, I mean, I guess it was bad. It could have had long-term results. And I thought that I was doing the right thing with my kid. I wasn't trying to be overbearing. All I was trying to do was say, hey, my youngest is getting older. She's making life choices, and I'm not going to lecture her. I'm just going to let it be what it is. And I explain how in that article that may not have been the right decision and how I learned that. And it's an emotional one. It's one of those ones where I get pretty vulnerable. So highly encourage you to check that out. That'll be next Wednesday. By the way, if you're not subscribed to the Substack already, you can get there at uncredible.me. You'll be taken directly to, I think there's a landing page that's like subscribe now, and then in very small letters it says maybe later. If you don't want to subscribe, that's fine. But the easiest way to get all the content that I'm putting out there is just to subscribe. It's free, and then it drops in your email. If you don't want it in your email, you can subscribe and dump it into a separate folder, set up your email to throw it into the trash, however you want to do that. But if you're not on Substack in general, I encourage you to do that. There's a lot of in-depth articles, stories, and things like that it's a little bit more wholesome than most of the social media out there. So if you're spending a lot of time on like Facebook or Twitter or X, whatever, Substack's a more wholesome place to be. In fact, for me personally, being on Substack, it's been sort of a challenge to slow down because I'm so used to just like Instagram, for example, or Facebook, both the meta platforms. It's sort of like you scroll through and you catch a glimpse of things and you're just moving at a steady pace. And the algorithm kind of wants you to spend 3 or 4 seconds, interact, and then move on to the next one. And it encourages that quick movement. Substack doesn't push you that way. It encourages you to slow down, read people's articles, engage in those articles, and then interact and have more meaningful interaction. So it's been a transition for me because I'm trying to get to where I spend as much of my time as I can on Substack rather than on these other platforms. But when you have followers and people that you're used to interacting on in other platforms, it's hard to just drag them over to a whole new platform too. So balancing that out is difficult. So that's next week on Wednesday. I've got these scheduled to come out at 9 a.m. So that's The Tears I Caused When Silence Speaks Too Loudly. And then next week's throwback article, this is kind of a fun one depending on your age. I don't know how this works for younger people, but if you're over 40, I think this one will be a good one for you. It's called When Rewinding Was Real, Life Before Streaming. And this is an article I wrote right around a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, when my son turned 17 and he was reaching adulthood. By the way, he did just turn 18, so he's a full-grown adult now. Not full-grown, but he's at the age where the state sees him as an adult. And I got to really thinking about technology. And when I was a kid, I would look around and see technology that my grandfather had that I didn't understand. And I didn't understand it till I was much older. And as he was turning 17, I was realizing that, man, a lot of the technology that I grew up with, he doesn't understand it. He will never have to interact with it. In fact, I'll share a funny story real quick here because it's not in the article. But my sister gave him an old computer that she felt was kind of dead, and he's been tinkering with that. If you saw the interview I did with him, you can see he's really into tinkering with computers and upgrading the hardware and all that stuff. He discovered that the computer that my sister had came equipped with a DVD writer, like rewritable DVD drive, which was very common when I was growing up. Like that was like the way to get music, to burn movies. That's how you made, we went from cassettes, which was when I was very young, and recording cassette tapes off the radio or merging them, to CDs and DVDs. And that was pretty much my teenage years, is burning and having these whole albums of cases of CDs that if, you'd have that in your car because that's how you listen to music. Now you've got Spotify, things like that. But he literally asked me the question. He goes, "Hey," because I actually I'm looking at them right now. They're in my basement with me. I have an old stack of CDs that are blank. They're just blank CDs, and nobody does that anymore. You don't write to CDs anymore. And he goes, "Could I put music on a CD with that burner?" And I just chuckled because I mean, yeah, that's what we did. But then, like, why would you do that now? It's a fun exercise for him to understand technology and where it came from. But it's not something he needs. It's not a benefit. You have things like Spotify or Apple Music and things like that. You don't need to do that. But in that article, When Rewinding Was Real, I just kind of reminisce about how that little extra effort in playing through a cassette or playing through a VHS tape, a movie, and then having to rewind it. I don't know if you remember this, but back when you rented VHS tapes, there's a lot of times you would get them and they wouldn't even have been rewound. And so you'd get it. You'd be so excited to watch this brand new movie that just came out, and you'd put it in and it would be like in the middle of the movie and you had to rewind it. And then they came out with automatic rewinders. And but like watching technology from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s just progress to where we're at now, which is the digital age, it's been a journey, and it's been a unique journey. And when I look back on the technology that has become utterly obsolete, I wonder, as I look around now, what technology exists today with the rise of AI and things that are moving so fast. We think technology moved so fast from the 80s to the 2000s. It's that pace of technological advancement is just continually ramping up. It's interesting to see where we're headed and what types of technology is my son playing around with now that he is just so used to and depends on, and is just a full part of his life. What types of technology will just be completely gone and meaningless? It's crazy to think that VHS tapes don't even, they're not even a thing, right? And growing up, that was the thing. Or DVDs. Like, even, isn't it wild to think that DVDs are basically obsolete. I mean, there's people who are collectors, just like records, right? There's people who are collectors of records and things like that, but you don't need to have a DVD anymore. You have digital streaming. It's not necessary. And so next week, The Tears I Caused and When Rewinding Was Real, check those out. Now, as I mentioned, if you're not a reader, right, you're listening to me open every week and share about the articles that I'm writing. And I know for some people who might not be into reading, that might be sort of like, oh, let's get through this. I want to highly encourage you to check out the Uncredible readings on Spotify. And these audio files are also on Substack. So you can go to the Substack page for that article and just click play. And if you're using the Substack app, it'll just play on your phone. So you don't have to, like, if you're the type of person who likes to listen while you do something, you can do that in the Substack app. But also, if you like to listen on Spotify and just let it run in the background, Uncredible Readings is the way to go. And here's a clip. This is actually a clip that I made from I made this from the Substack where you can create like a video of me reading. But let me play this for you. And this is just like a sample of this week's article, Collecting Chips. Anger boiled as I walked calmly back to my station. I relieved the operator covering me and immediately hit the emergency stop on my machine, the same machine that had been running without guarding for weeks. The machine operator on the backside rushed over, confused. I can't run it without guarding, I said. It isn't safe. We better call maintenance. She knew exactly what I was doing, and despite her frustration, I think part of her respected it. Moments later, Mr. Military Maintenance came storming over, standing nose to nose with me. You're getting really close to the edge, he shouted, doing everything he could to intimidate me. Calm on the outside, but seething on the inside, I replied, No, you are. So that's just a clip from this week's article, Collecting Chips. And that story just sticks in my head because I remember the build up to that situation and I knew I had this guy. Like I shut that. I was thinking about doing it. And one of the things I reveal in that article is the older I've gotten, the more patient I've become with like not trying to come back at people when I have this stack of like, man, this person's not really a genuine person. And I really don't appreciate the way they interact with people. Like they're not all they seem to think they are. And they make the same mistakes that we do, and they need to be held accountable, or be giving grace in the same way that we give grace all the time. And in his particular situation, he was holding everybody to tiny, minute safety standards while he was leaving gigantic safety issues, which were his job, just leaving them unfixed and untaken care of. And it was sort of like one of these situations where it was like, listen, we all need to work safely, and you targeting what might be considered minor safety concerns is not making the safety concerns that you're causing by not doing your job and focusing on that. It's not making those any better. So let's get those fixed and then maybe worry about other people. But that story, I just remember he was so mad at me. And I think it was because I was so young at the time, or I appeared naive, or maybe I appeared stupid. I'm not sure what this guy thought. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to put up with this guy playing games with me. And if he wants to do this, we can do it. And that moment, I joked about that with my brother for years, but I still bring it up. Just the fact that he came up to me, and I don't know what he meant. I remember my brother asked me what he meant by, you're getting close to the edge. The edge of what, buddy? You got a safety concern. Like, you want to harp on me about safety? Well, let's get to work on this machine. All right. If that's what we're going to do, let's do it. So the whole point of that is to check out the Uncredible readings, either through listening to them on Spotify or listening to them straight from the Substack at uncredible.me. I think I'm close to 50 on there. We're getting close to 50 articles there. So, and they're only about, this is the other thing I'll say about the Uncredible readings. If the podcast being an hour long, which I was trying for 45 minutes and I'm blowing that out of the water every week now. If that's too long for you, if you're not into long form, these things are only like 4, 5, 10 minutes long. I think the max is 10 minutes on these articles. I try to keep them as brief as possible. So If you're an audiobook person, those are perfect for you. So, all right, now let's get into our weekly update. We are into week 7 of marathon training, and I thought, as I was thinking about how long this 20-week training block is for me, I haven't really mentioned or shown. I might have done it in the first episode, but I definitely didn't put it on screen. I wanted to remind everybody who's listening or watching what my 2026 goals are and what my running schedule looks like. Now, I'm training for the Buffalo Marathon, and basically I've created this schedule. I call it the Uncredible Tour, but I'm running a whole bunch of races that aren't like well known, at least not well known like at a worldwide scale. Getting into running has been sort of a fun thing for me, but it hasn't been like I want to do the majors. And I only found out about what's called the major races like maybe a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. And that's when I came up with this Uncredible Tour, where I'm not trying to win at Boston or even qualify. Like, there's a lot of people who want to qualify for Chicago or qualify for Boston. I guess there's one in like Tokyo or something like that. That sounds exciting. I mean, I can understand that if you are into the racing world, that those would be like, man, if I could just participate in that race, and there's lotteries and stuff for this. I'm like, I got into this for weight loss, and this is all just basically for fun for me, for self-development. So I thought, you know what? Those things are expensive. The travel time is crazy. I see people getting really worked up about like qualifying for these races, and maybe down the road, that'll be something that's interesting to me. But I'm kind of a small town type of a guy. Like I'm more interested in just the everyday average person, hence the name of the podcast and the things that I present. So I think I'll put this on screen, the Uncredible Tour. I ran the Rochester Winter Warrior Half Marathon in January. That was my first planned race. My next one is the Buffalo Marathon, and I intentionally gave myself a lot of extra time to train for this because of how bad my first marathon went. And I guess it didn't go too bad. My time was 5 hours and 2 minutes, but my goal was 4:30. So, and I'm telling you, when I got to like mile 16 or 17, I was cardio-wise, I was probably the most frustrating thing about this running and this training has been what I would have expected to hold me back, which would be my energy and my cardio, hasn't been the thing holding me back. Like, the thing that's really been slowing me down has been my leg muscles. And I really wanted to give myself time to build my endurance in my legs and in my training. So this 20 weeks is really to get my longevity so that by the end of the marathon, I'm not just like barely walking. I mean, the end of my first marathon in Presque Isle in Erie, PA. Presque Isle is the name of the half marathon. It was a Presque Isle half. But in that marathon, I was feeling great at mile 13. And I thought, this is good. I can do this. Man, when I got to like mile 16, I was like, my legs started cramping and I had to walk. And probably from miles 20 to 22, there was a couple, and this is so demoralizing, by the way. There was a couple in front of me that was walking. And I mean, they were just walking. It was almost like a situation where they have done marathons before. And I kind of got the impression that the husband, boyfriend, whatever, like I got the impression that they had run together much quicker. But for this particular one, like maybe he was injured and was trying to like ease himself into it. That's what it looked like. And keep in mind, I followed these people for 2.5, 3 miles. And there was actually a point at which I would pass them and then my leg would start cramping up and then I'd stop. I'd have to walk or even stop to stretch the leg and then they would walk by me. And I'm like, what am I doing? So then it got to this point where I'm just sort of like, anytime I would get close to them, they would start jogging. And I realized that my running at that point, which was like a very light jog, they were just walking. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like it was a mental game for sure. But I really wanted for the Buffalo Marathon to be able to actually at least be, you know, putting in 11, 12-minute miles at the end of it. So that's May 24th. And then things start to pick up in July. And my bigger goal, like my large-scale goal, is to run a 5 or 10K, a half marathon, and a marathon or ultra in as many states as possible. And so I'm kind of trying to complete different states along the way. And the Winter Warrior in Rochester completed my New York tour. Last summer, I completed the Pennsylvania tour. So I have Pennsylvania and New York, and I'm thinking about behind me on camera hanging my next license plate, which will be Ohio, because after the Buffalo Marathon, I'll have New York done, and then I'm going to try to work through all of the Ohio races. And so July 11th, I have the Heat Wave Half in Cleveland. July 25th, I have Halfway to the Holidays in Johnstown, and that's a marathon. That one's going to be fun. No goals for that one. I just want to go there and enjoy it. And then August 2nd, the Little Miami 10K in Cincinnati. So that'll complete Ohio. And then I've got some sort of want to do races, like races I want to do. And that is the Marine Corps Marathon and the Rocky Half Marathon. The Marine Corps Marathon is sort of, I don't know if nostalgic is the right word. That's a marathon that the guy who encouraged me to get into these races, I wrote an article about Rod, and he might be watching this, by the way. I want to go and do that with him. That'll be he's going to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think that's going to be his 30th Marine Corps Marathon, and I'll be doing my first Marine Corps Marathon, and I think I should check this, but I think that's also it's the 51st running of the Marine Corps Marathon. So him and his brother have been doing the Marine Corps Marathon forever, and the fact that they've done as many as they've done of one specific marathon is just crazy. So I just wanted to go and do that one because of my connection with Rod. Probably wouldn't do that one if it wasn't for him, honestly, but it also does check off Virginia for me. I guess some of that's in Washington, D.C. as well, but I'm just going to call it Virginia, and that'll start that state for me. And then the Rocky Half Marathon, I'm finding out that the Rocky Half Marathon is not even a half marathon. It's more of like a, what is it? It's two races. They do a 5K, which is 3.1 miles, and then they do a 10 miler right after that. And so you run the 5K, stop, get to the start finish line, and then run the 10 miles. So it's going to be two separate races, but my brother got me onto this. He's not into running at all, but I've been talking so much and doing so much with running. He was like, "Oh, you should do this one." So hopefully I can encourage him to get into that with me, and that'll be fun. If he doesn't go, that's fine. But I thought it would be fun. The neat thing about the Rocky, I'll call it half marathon, but the Rocky run is you get a medal for completing for each one of the races. So you actually will get a medal it's a Rocky themed medal as well, but you get a Rocky themed medal for the 5K, the 10 mile, and the half marathon because you combine the two. And then there's also one other medal you can get, which is they have this thing called Mount Drago. I guess a part of the 10 miles is a pretty steep incline. Don't know anything about it. But if you're if you're the top 100 in your gender, male or female, then if you're in the top 100, you'll get the Drago medal as well. So that's something for fun that I'm going to do, but that's my race schedule and wanted to bring that up. I won't bring it up again for a little while, probably not until we get closer to Ohio. But for right now, we're training for the Buffalo Marathon. And last Saturday, let me tell you, running is funny because you do things that, how do I explain this? I've run half marathons successfully. The Winter Warrior half marathon in the cold. Best time, personal best, sub 2 hours. So when you go out to run, I set out to run 15 miles last Saturday. I'm trying to increase my mileage. And really the goal was just to go easy. Take it easy and log miles. And I went to the mall here, and that's where I trained for the Winter Warrior half. So nothing unfamiliar at all about this process. And the weather was good. The footing was good. Everything, for all intents and purposes, everything was good. And I get out there, and I'm talking like mile 10. And keep in mind, we're at that point, that was the end of week 6, heading into week 7, where I'm going to start jacking up my mileage. And I thought, well, why not start now? That was my thinking. So like around mile 10, I'm like, man, I'm kind of cooked. It's kind of over. Like But then I'm like, no, you set out to do at least 14, so let's get 14. And I'm telling you, when I got to mile 13, let me see if I can explain this. So the mall, running around the mall is roughly a mile. If I was running 7 miles, it'd be 7 laps, and I would end up with like 7.3 miles. However, when you start running 8, 9, 10 miles, it's a little further. The way I do it, it's a little further than a mile. So you start, your watch will buzz and let you know you completed a mile a little sooner each time, which early on is cool because as you're pacing yourself and you're just trying to be steady with your runs, you're like, you get that earlier and earlier. However, about towards the end of this run, I would have to go a full half of a lap. Like, how do I want to explain this to make sense? Now, like, I'm getting it, and the next mile starts here as well. And so you have to go a whole nother, and so I'm doing the math in my head, and I'm like, if I go to 14 miles, I'll have to run a full half of a lap to get back to my car now because of how that's been tracking back in my favor until it's not. And there's a part of you that wants to like get that full lap. So I think I'd probably have to do like probably 18 laps is probably what it would take to where it would all level out and I would end up back in my car. So I come around for lap 13 and I thought, well, I'll be halfway around to my car at 13. But then if I want 14, I've got to run basically another mile and a half because at 13, I'm halfway around the mall back to my car. So I'm probably not explaining that well at all. But in my head, I'm thinking, I'm cooked. Like I can feel myself getting tired. I was fueling, not the best fueling, by the way. I used gummy bears, but I was just fueling easily. I didn't think that this training session was going to be that difficult. So long story short, I hit the 13 miles. I do the extra half and ended up being 0.6 miles to get back to my car. And I got nothing left. Like I can tell that this is done. So I get to my car. I drink some drink. I probably should have had electrolytes. And I had brought with me, I have 5-gallon empty jugs for my I've got one of these water coolers that cools the water and heats the water and you get fresh filtered water, whatever. And my plan was to run, hit up Walmart, and then bring those home. Plan working great. I get to Walmart, go inside, and turn the little filtered water thing on. The water pours in. And as I'm standing there waiting for the water to fill, I start to get like lightheaded. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And the muscle from my hip to my thigh starts to like twitch a little bit. And I'm like, whew, this is a little weird. Like I haven't experienced this before. Like I'm feeling kind of like not good. Like, so then I kind of lean on the cart and I like kind of like, ugh, right? Try to take some deep breaths. And then the first 5-gallon water bucket finishes. I throw that in. Oops, don't want to do that. Put the other one on. And as I'm staring there watching this water fill up slowly, I mean, I'm getting dizzy. Like I'm genuinely in trouble. And I'm thinking, what do I do? You know, if I had grabbed a few things to buy, I would have just walked back. I would have left the cart. I would have just went back to my car and relaxed. But these water jugs are my jugs. Like I'm not buying new jugs. Like these are ones that I bring back to Walmart and I refill. These are my jugs. They cost money to replace. I can't just leave these sitting in the cart full. Like what? So I'm like, okay, let's just get to the front. Now, our Walmart's a self-checkout, but the nice thing about the water is you don't scan anything. You just type in water, click it. I'm like, okay, maybe I can make it back. Throw the second water bottle in the cart. I start walking back and I start thinking to myself, I don't know if I can stand in aisle waiting because I could tell there's people, like there's pretty good lines. This was a Saturday afternoon. I'm like, oof. I don't know if I can stand in the aisle and not pass out. And I'm trying not to make a scene. So I cut down through one of the aisles because I'm like, my best strategy right now is to just get to the bathroom so I can breathe, get down and breathe. And I have to stop like 4 times in Walmart at one point. So our Walmart has these pallets of TVs. They're just sort of laid out. and there was a 40-inch TV sitting on the ground. I literally knelt down to pretend to read that TV because I am so dizzy. I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And then I'm thinking through, like, what happens if you pass out in a Walmart? Like, what what is that? And I'll give you some backstory here in a minute. But anyway, I make it to the bathroom, and I go into the handicap bathroom, completely gone. Like, I could tell it's over. I'm even checking my watch for heart rate because I'm like, something's not right. So I lay down in the bathroom and just gather myself. Now, let me give you some context, because as I'm telling this story, some people might be thinking, dude, you need to chill. Like, you need to chill. And I am somebody who, over the course of my life, has passed out multiple times. It's a problem. Okay. It's a real problem. But as an adult, and in childhood, I didn't really understand it. Growing up, it happened probably 5 or 6 times. Had no idea how to control it. It would come over me. And then next thing I knew, I was waking up to terrified adults all around me. Like, oh no, what happened? But it would be most insignificant things. Okay. The first time it happened, we had purchased this 3-foot long balloon, and we were playing with it, and I poked it and it twisted my finger weird. It hurt. Next thing you know, I'm on the ground. Gone. I don't feel anything. I don't sense it coming. I'm just gone. And then I wake up. So fast forward, I get into junior high, and we used to slam our lockers on each other because you'd be late to class if you had to do your combination. Of course, as a junior higher, you're getting used to opening the locker, like learning your combination, memorizing your combination. And so one of the funny things to do would be somebody would go through that stressful thing, open their locker, and then you'd shut it, and they'd have to do that all over again. So it's just kind of like a funny prank we would pull on each other. Well, this one time, this kid went to do that, and I saw him coming, so I went to stop it, but the timing was such that it hit my finger, gone. He thought he killed me. This kid, when I woke up, he looked worse than I could have ever felt. I mean, he was white in the face, and apparently, when I used to pass out like that, my head would just hit the ground so hard. But I don't know that because I'm passed out. I'm completely unconscious, and it would terrify everyone around me. So anyway, as I get older, I start realizing the signs. Like, I'll start to get lightheaded. One of the telltale signs for me that I'm close to passing out is my vision. I'll get this like white circle in my vision. If I close my eyes, you can really see it. And that means I know at that point I have to get low to the ground. I have to get down. I have to breathe. I had that 4 times trying to get to the bathroom in Walmart. I mean, I was close. I give you that context, though, because I'm not in a situation that I'm unfamiliar with, other than the fact that I wasn't injured. This is the first time I can ever remember being that close to passing out without having some kind of mostly hand or elbow or arm injury. It's usually associated with that. This time, the only thing I can think of is either low electrolytes or low calories. I can't tell which one it was, but one of those two things had me almost completely gone. So anyway, long story short, I lay down in the bathroom at Walmart, gather myself, and I'm good to go. I walk out of there, and now I'm chuckling about it because I'm like, man, I almost passed out off of a half marathon. I mean, just over a half a marathon. And I'm like, you got to understand that just less than 2 months ago, in 22 degrees out, I ran a half marathon at sub 2 hours, walked to the car, got food. My son drove me 3 hours home. No problems. A little bit of leg soreness after we got home, mostly from getting stiff from the drive. And here I am, 6 weeks later. I do the exact same race at a slow pace, and I'm like cooked. So it had to have been something with the I don't know, electrolytes, calories, something wasn't right. Maybe I didn't fuel properly. I did use gels in the half marathon that I did, the Winter Warrior half marathon. So maybe that was it. Maybe I just didn't fuel properly. All I know is that was one of my worst long runs in a long time. We got it done, and tomorrow I'm going to try to do another long run similar to that one. I'm going to try to go for 14 or 15 again because I didn't hit it then. But yeah, so the long run wasn't great, but fast forward, I did Sunday I did rest and my son's birthday party, and then Monday I did an easy 6.7 miles. Tuesday, I did a structured 7 miles. I'm dealing with some blisters. I think I mentioned this last week. I can't remember. But I got Brooks Ghost 7s for Christmas, and I haven't worn them. I've done one treadmill run with them, and the treadmill run, I started to feel blisters, and I was like, these might not be the best shoes for me. Saturday, when I ran that half marathon, I definitely had blisters, and now they're turning into calluses because I'm using those shoes regularly, mainly because the snow's gone here. We've got good clear roads, dry roads, so I'm using those shoes pretty consistently. But man, the blisters are bad. So anyway, Tuesday really accentuated that because I threw those shoes on again and I tried to do a pretty good paced workout. The blisters were about the only thing that were tough with that. And then yesterday I did 8 miles. The weather was 50 degrees, beautiful out, absolutely great run all around. So tomorrow today's a rest day. It's pretty nice out. I'm looking out the window. It's pretty nice out today. So I might go out and run like a 5K or something just to add mileage. But tomorrow I want to hit 14, maybe 15. We'll see. I have a 7-mile loop that I do. And instead of going to the mall, I might try to do that twice and see how that feels. We'll try to get the feeling right. But that's where we're at right now with the running schedule and just the weekly update. So just stay tuned. We're training for the Buffalo Marathon, and as we get closer to that, the race schedule is going to pick up this summer. So just stay tuned for that. So let's get into the news. By the way, we do have these. I do have screens for these now so that I can transition to these. Sometimes I do need to transition out. A couple times I have to stop the video or walk away from the video and cut. Last week it happened multiple times. We have a window right here. I'm looking out at one of my basement windows. I don't know if the one behind me is in view on the camera or not, but it's similar to that one. And one of my cats will come and stand in that window and just meow. And I can hear him through the headphones, so I assume you guys can hear him on the camera. So I'll just stop and chase him down. So, but anyway, let's get into the news. I got 2 things this week, and don't want to spend too much time on it, but I'm 3 weeks in a row now talking about Epstein files. And I don't really want to get in the habit of that, but it is one of the biggest news stories out there. But before I do that, I had a note. I never really got to it because the Epstein thing came out and it was kind of a distraction. But I'll put it this way. It's kind of interesting how one news cycle will completely replace the next news cycle to the point where you almost forget that the other thing was happening. And just to give you an example of this, we had the breaking news story of these Somali daycare centers, this fraud that was happening in Minnesota, where you had this guy going around to these supposedly daycare centers with misspelled words on the signs and vans that hadn't moved in weeks, months. And this guy was going into all the money that was being spent on these daycare centers. And that kind of disappeared when we started getting video clips of ICE, shooting that one woman, that interaction with the car, and then shooting that guy that was trying to protect another woman. And so that kind of took over the news cycle, and the story about the daycare and the fraud kind of disappeared. And now they've released the Epstein files. I mean, we got to a fever pitch with those ICE riots, with what ICE was doing in Minnesota. We had 2 deaths. Now it's like it's not happening anymore. It just stopped. It's kind of weird. And so the Epstein files comes in and that kind of fades away. But I never had a chance to share this, but I thought it was kind of funny. If you go back and look at some of those videos of the ICE agents that people are complaining about, one thing I noticed was a lot of these ICE agents don't look physically fit. And I'm not sure if it's the gear, but they look unfit. They look overweight. obese. And the funny thought that I had, and I was hoping to turn this into like an in the news, a quick in the news story. I'm pretty sure if if a handful of ICE agents were trying to chase me, I think I could get away. And I don't even think I'd have to run that fast. They don't look, I mean, their gear alone is a disadvantage, but they don't look like they're capable of generating 5 miles of cardio. And that's not like an arrogant thing that I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is, like, I'm watching these situations where they pull out the pepper spray. Good luck catching me with that, buddy. Good luck. And I haven't seen one ICE agent that I think could hang with me for 10 miles. Now, I'd pass out at 13 apparently right now. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but has anyone else noticed that? Share with me in the comments if you have noticed that some of the ICE agents specifically look physically unfit. I've seen this in the police force as well. But specifically these videos with these ICE agents, if they didn't have the weapons, I don't think they'd stand a chance. It's pretty sad. And it makes me wonder what the ongoing physical standard is to be a police officer or an ICE agent or federal agent. Like what ongoing continual physical things do they have to be able to do in order to retain their position? You know, it reminds me of, you ever known somebody who has had their driver's license for 30 years, or 30 is not a good number, 40 years, right? You're getting into your 50s, 60s, and 70s, and their eyesight's going. And all they have to do to get their license is to go in and read the small line at the DMV. And then they get another 8 years. That's how it is in New York anyway. It's like, maybe they should have to retake the test. I remember, listen, my son just last year had to pass his, or 2 years ago, had to pass his, I guess it was a little less than like a year and a half ago, had to pass his driver's test. And I remember thinking to myself, I bet most people couldn't pass this. He failed 3 times. And the only reason is because of how he was stopping at stop signs. Like, they wanted him to double stop, which nobody does. Nobody in their normal everyday life stops at a stop sign, looks, creeps forward, looks again. Like, nobody does that. It's not normal behavior. But that's what they wanted from him. And I mean, they would have him out for like 5 minutes and then he'd fail for that. It's ridiculous. I understand why we do it. But I say all that because it's like people become woefully disqualified over time, and maybe there should be like a higher standard. But for police and ICE agents, I kind of wonder what are you expected to be able to do? Because I could definitely run away. I mean, even if I had to walk and I had a couple gels and some water, I'm good for 20 miles easy. You know, especially at a slow pace. You know, I get away from you in the first 5K, and then we're off to the races. We just sort of light jog it. You better have a cruiser. But I mean, just physically, they seem unfit. So I thought that was funny. However, that's sort of like a precursor to what I want to talk about, and that is the Epstein files. Now, last week, I threw out this idea that, you know, 3 million documents is a lot of documents. And I don't think anyone's actually reading these documents, not in real time. And I kind of confirmed that. And I'm going to show you an Epstein file today. But before I do that, I'm convinced that a lot of this is political theater. And I'm more convinced of it now than I was when I threw that. You know, we have these thoughts in our heads. We see these news cycles, and we assume that the people who are telling us stories have dug into the Epstein files and they've gone through 1,000 files and they've read them all. Bro, I'm telling you right now, I haven't had a chance to go file by file. I did figure out that you can go data set by data set and numerically go through each PDF file. But I haven't done that. But I will show you what I have done just off of a basic search and demonstrate for you why I'm fairly certain, unless people who are researching this know more than I do, which is possible, I'm fairly certain nobody's really going through these files. It's all news cycle. And they're picking up on 1 or 2 words, 1 or 2 documents that they heard or were tipped off to, and then running with that story. And what I've noticed in conservative circles specifically is somebody has keyed in, I haven't searched this, but somebody has keyed in on pizza, grape soda, beef jerky, these terms that were code words back when Pizzagate was important, and they're running with it, right? And one of my favorite things that I've seen this on Tucker Carlson. I saw this on Joe Rogan. What was the other podcast I saw this on? Oh, I've seen Part of the Problem. Dave Smith referenced this as well. I'm fairly confident none of these people have actually looked at any of these files. I'm fairly confident of it. They're just running the news cycle injects these things into them, and then they run with it. And in their defense, I've been doing the same thing the last 2 weeks, just going off of what I've heard on the news. But my curiosity really got to me, and I thought I should, if I'm going to say anything on this podcast, and I'm going to put it out into the world, I should at least have some documentation of it. And so I want to show you, and I'll explain this to you in a minute. I want to show you one of the Epstein files, and I'll put it on screen. I got to get my notepad out for this one. By the way, let me just show you something. This is my deep dive. I got to talk to you about deep diving too. So here's this on camera. This is my handwritten files notes that I got from a couple of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to 10 files I went through just super quickly. Now, if you can see this on screen, this is supposedly an email from somebody named Leslie Groff to a person named Vince Fauci. The subject is R.E. Jeffrey Epstein, and the date is Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. The time is 8:03. It's a blank email. There's a subject, header, date, and at the very bottom there is I assume the FBI code, DOJ code, EFTA string of numbers. Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because, like I mentioned last week, one of the things that we're being told is that 3.5 million documents have been released. Okay. Why is this one blank? Now listen. This gets fun. I could have searched for hours and found one blank document and then cut this scene or cut this news article or shared the story and been like, oh, it's full of these documents. Let me walk you through my process. And this is just straight up. I didn't spend more than maybe an hour. Let me put it this way. When I first decided to do this, I was just going to look up Dr. Anthony Fauci. I was just curious, right? I was picking something that was somebody who was active in the 90s and 2000s, who was well known, and who I'm not a real big fan of because of COVID. So I threw his name in there out of the blue, and I got like 100, I think I got 180 hits. You can do this yourself. You can type it. Now, I didn't do Anthony Fauci, and I didn't do Tony Fauci. I just did his last name, Fauci, because I figured that would narrow it down. And I got like 180 hits. So if you go to the DOJ website for the Epstein files and you search for Fauci, you're going to get 180 hits. And one of the things you're going to notice right out of the gate, and I'm not going to share one of those files. I could, that's not the point. You can do this yourself. And I got to be careful saying that. I'm showing you this file specifically, but I'll reference some other ones as well. But you can do this yourself. One of the things I noticed was some of the references to Dr. Fauci are just news articles. And one of the things I noticed on a repetitive basis was I'm pretty sure all the references to Anthony Fauci have nothing to do with Epstein. And the reason for that is the file that you find is like a press briefing. I don't know if it's a White House press briefing, an FBI press briefing. It's a press briefing. And literally, all it is, it's like, here's the headline from Fox News. Here's the headline from USA Today. And this goes on for pages. Now, the reason, you could have a 30-page document, okay? You could have a 30-page document where at the bottom, they're talking about news regarding COVID, right? And that's where Fauci's name would come up. And a lot of it was, Donald Trump throws Fauci under the bus or says this about Fauci. And so that's Fauci's name is in that document. The reason that comes up in the Epstein files is because at the top, there was another big news article about Ghislaine Maxwell being imprisoned or Ghislaine Maxwell speaks or something like that. The entire document has nothing to do with Epstein. Nothing at all. to do with what we would perceive as being pertinent to catching child trafficking or what he was into or who he was colluding with. It's got nothing to do with that. It's a press briefing. Now, this happens just on Fauci search alone. This happens probably half of the time. Is that a safe bet? Maybe less than half the time, because actually, I would say more than half of it is this right here, this Vince Fauci. Now, I don't know who Vince Fauci is, and I'm not releasing a new name that nobody's ever heard of. I will tell you that this Vince Fauci, you're not going to find hardly anything about him on anything. And basically, there is an email, about a 3-page email chain, if you find the full one, where he is writing to this Lindsey Groff and some other people about scheduling an interview on Skype. The weird thing about it is there's one email where he confirms that he's going to do the Skype interview, and then there are flight itinerary. Well, you don't have to fly anywhere to do a Skype interview, so I don't know if I'm breaking any news there. But this, what I'm showing on camera, I don't know how I'm going to cut this. I'll have to figure out a way to do that. This is all the blank files. Now, when I say blank, what I mean is emails like the one I have on screen, where it's a from, a to, a subject, a date, and nothing in it. And I did some ChatGPT work, and this could be because when they're doing document processing, they separate these fields, and so it produces a blank document. But my point is this. Regardless of the reason for the blank documents, and then the other thing that happens is like, so let's say I wrote an email to you, be from Jeremy to whomever, and the subject is Uncredible Episode 6 podcast, right? Hey, just want you to know that there's a new episode out. And then you wrote back to me and you said, cool, I'll check it out tomorrow. And then I write back to you a couple days later and I say, hey, what did you think? And then you write back another day later and you say, hey, that episode was great. I really love the segment about the Epstein files. Somehow this would turn into like 8 different documents in the Epstein files. And I'll tell you why. Every email as it builds gets its own separate document. And then it gets worse than that. Because if you keep going through it, I assume these documents were put into some type of a court case or entered into evidence. And then they're clearly typed up in what would be considered like a legal form. I don't know how to explain that other than it's not in this email format. It's in an actual like format. I don't know how to explain that, but it's like in legal documentation, they separate things by lines, and it's broken down very, you can tell the difference, but it's the same information over and over and over again. And all you have to do is type in Fauci in the DOJ website, get these results, go to page, I think it's page 3 or 4. And then for the next 4 or 5 pages, you're just going to get this one email or a series of emails or this one context. And it's like 15, 20, 30 emails. 8 of them, the ones I have here, are blank, just like this. They're not all to Leslie Groff. Some of them have from, no name. My favorite thing is one of them, when you finally get to the point where you discover that this Skype interview is actually going to happen, they're constantly redacting this Vince Fauci's email. And then in that one, they actually reveal the whole email address. And it's like what are we doing? But, and I don't know if it's because it's an invalid email address and it's not the same as the one that they redacted. I'm not sure what's going on there, but this is what I would consider to be a interesting case of the nonsense that is in the Epstein files. And when I hear somebody say they did a deep dive, no, they didn't. Because I found this in an hour and I was just goofing around, right? I literally just goofing around. I'm not really taking the time to get into this, right? I was kind of trying to get evidence. And by the way, I'd be willing to argue that you've listened to multiple news stories, podcasts, and you haven't seen anyone actually show an Epstein file. I don't think people are actually doing it. They're all PDF files. And I've heard all kinds of crazy stories about how some of them can be converted into MP4s and you can actually get full videos because they had the wrong extension on them and all this stuff. So there are some people out there, I guess, doing all this work. But I'm telling you right now, anybody who's taking the time to actually glance at this would go, why are this many files just blank nonsense or news briefings, right? And the thing that struck me as interesting, and I'm not Trump side or Democrat side, this is all BS to me, but Trump's name is going to be in these files simply because of the fact that he's in the news, which is absurd. And I see the Democrats running with the fact that Trump's in there this many times. Well, how many of them are just press briefings where Trump's in the newsreel? And he could have been listed like 50 times in those, because they literally, like the one I looked at for Fauci, it was literally just Trump says this about Fauci and 15 different news sources that are saying that. I don't even know why these documents exist, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't know what in the world is going on where we're saving these press documents. I mean, I guess that's good, but this has nothing to do with Epstein. And then towards the end of this search, if you get down to like the 180s, there's probably like 30 documents of like the same thing. I couldn't make heads or tail of it. It's some random person. Maybe it's a victim. I don't know what it was, but it was just a whole bunch of memes from Twitter. It's Twitter screenshots. It's like somebody was complaining that their information got put out there. I have zero context for this. I'm just curious about the inner workings of it. And so basically my uncredible take on the Epstein files right now is they've just released a whole bunch of BS, and maybe in there somewhere there's a tiny little bit of a view into what the government's doing. But basically what they did was they flooded the information pipeline so people are staying busy. And I can picture it in my head. I can picture people clamoring for these files. And just as an example, I can see like a Kash Patel going, oh, they want the Epstein files? Give them everything. And then they can say, we released the most files. We're the most transparent. It's all BS. It's all BS. You know? And we're in a digital age now where thousands and thousands and thousands of emails get sent every single day. And if you split those up into every header with a blank sheet and then split it up to every email that went out, every email that came back, sure. I mean, you could turn an email chain of 5 emails into 30 documents. It's not 30 documents. It's one email. Like, nobody else would perceive it that way. By the way, another way you can see that you can kind of like look this up is there's, if you look up Gmail, I forget it's like a Gmail I don't know what world. I think it's gmail.world. I confirmed like these blank emails are in there as well. You go to, it's basically set up like a Gmail account. And if you go to the far left and go to the bottom of gmail.world and you type in Vince Fauci, you'll find all the emails going back and forth between them, and just click on the ones that are blank and you'll get these blank emails. And my point is, I think all of this is a distraction because they've been able to completely wash out of the news cycle anything about ICE, anything about fraud in Minnesota, and anything about fraud in California, which I think was sort of like next on the guy who did the Minnesota research. I think next on his list was going to be California. And I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but probably the next news dump or the next document dump is going to be on aliens. And they're going to put all that stuff out there. And basically flooding this information pipeline, let me put it this way. They're keeping the news busy. And they're finding a way to also keep podcasters busy and regular individuals who are doing this busy. They're just shoving this stuff down there. And I would love to hear, like, what the explanation is for these blank documents. Like, even if it is a situation where this is the way the document feeder produces the documents. And ChatGPT was basically saying that if you had this missing, it would look like you were missing a document. So you have to have this in the files because it would be like 1, 2, 3, and then you'd have this one would be 4. And if you take it out, that document's missing. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 5. And so you wouldn't have that sequence and it would look like something was missing. Sure, but couldn't you just go 1, 2, 3 and then like have a mark on it, like, or have a separate data set that's all blanks? Because you would know what these are. If you were doing this properly, you would know which ones were the blanks. I don't know. All I'm saying is When we're talking about 3.5 million documents, that's inflated. That's inflated. And that's just me doing a quick search on the DOJ website and clicking through a handful of emails. I was able to find out of, this one email chain of Vince Fauci and Lindsey Groff, and a couple other people were mentioned as well. When you get to the full email chain, I found 8 that I documented, 8 blank emails. Like, what are we doing? And some of them are the same. The cool thing is, I will tell you this, the cool thing is the dates and times. This dates and time situation, it's all happened on April 5th, 2017. A lot of back and forth. And if you want to go down the conspiracy pipeline, ChatGPT said that a blank email like this could also indicate that that's how they were signaling each other to call. So hey, I need you to call me, but they just sent a blank email. Who knows? Another thought I had was maybe at one point there was a file attached to this document, and that file is no longer attached, or it's been redacted, so you just get this email. So maybe pictures were being sent back and forth. But again, you're saying you're releasing 3.5 million documents, and you put out a handful of blanks, and then a boatload of press briefings. Come on. But it's all very interesting. I would assume that some people are doing their research, but my guess is a lot of this stuff is just all BS and not worth your time, to be perfectly honest. So, all right, let's get into our main topic through an uncredible lens. And I got to thinking, because I was on that track with Anthony Fauci, kind of playing around with the Epstein files, I kind of went down memory lane a little bit this past week with COVID. And that was mostly spurred on by the Joe Rogan podcast. I listen to a lot of Rogan, mainly because he's long form and I can spend the time to do it. But he had Dr. Robert Malone back on his podcast. It's been, what did he say, 6 years it's been since he was on the podcast. And back during COVID, Rogan took a lot of heat for having guys like Robert Malone and Peter McCullough on the podcast. They were highly credentialed doctors, tons of credibility in the world of mRNA vaccines and how to properly handle a pandemic like we were facing. And they had ideas that were basically being silenced. Ideas that shouldn't have been silenced. Ideas that may have led us away from the vaccines and more towards things that were affordable and more accessible for people. And there's a lot of questions as to why that happened, why the federal government pushed vaccines over just over-the-counter type drugs that we already had that would be effective against COVID. There's a lot of conspiracy theories there. But what I wanted to talk about today was how I accidentally prevented COVID. This has been something that perplexed me the entire time we went through COVID. We had the 6 feet rule. One of the most frustrating things for me when we were going through COVID as a night shifter was, for some reason, stores stopped being open at night. Never really understood that one. In an effort to keep people apart, they squeezed us back together by shortening the hours. Now, back in 2019, 2020, I used to go and do my shopping at 3 in the morning. I would get out of work at 3, 4 in the morning, hit up Walmart, go home. During COVID, they cut that off. You couldn't do it. And it was one of the most frustrating things because they were saying we're trying to create social distance, but they were implementing policies and taking actions that were actually forcing us into a sardine can. It was so weird. For example, our Walmart closed one entrance altogether. Never understood that. In fact, one of the things that people started wondering was, can you close an opening, an egress from a fire standpoint? You got to be able to let people out. It was a weird, the whole time frame, when you think back to COVID, just a whole nother story that just completely disappeared. It's bizarre to think back to what went on. And it's hard to even believe it was real. But one of the things that perplexed me was back in 2019, that's when my fitness journey actually began. Almost in conjunction with COVID, like COVID was starting to happen. And I had just come to this conclusion that I needed to lose weight. And so that's actually when I started walking. I weighed almost 240 pounds. Man, I was way overweight. And I just decided I was going to start walking. And then the COVID protocols started coming out, and they were telling us like, hey, you can't be outside and you need to do this and social distancing and all that. And I just said, no, I'm just going to keep doing my workouts outdoors the way I plan to. And all throughout COVID, no vaccine, working out, overweight for sure. I mean, that was probably at my worst health during that time. Never got COVID. I would have expected to have gotten COVID. And then I could have claimed, one of the things that was frustrating for me was I could never claim that I had the antibodies because I never actually got COVID, as far as I'm aware. Now, I didn't do any PCR testing. I don't think I PCR tested once. No, I did. No, I did one time to go back to work. I PCR tested. Negative, by the way. I got a cold, got put out of work for symptoms, and then I had to either use my vacation or get a negative PCR test to get back. So I did do that. I think that was one time. Yeah, and I was negative. Trying to think if I had any other. I think that was my only, maybe one other time. Because I think the other time that I was out of work for it, it was a close contact situation where we got a week off. I probably had to test negative then too. And then the other test that I did was my doctor tried to encourage me to get the shot. And I said, before I get the shot, I would like to have a blood draw and see if I have any of the antibodies first. Because I was under the impression, and I mean, the right impression, that if I had already had COVID and I had the antibodies, I didn't need the shot. So I was trying to come up with any reason to not need the shot. This was during the time that Aaron Rodgers was pulling his whole, yeah, I'm inoculated. He hadn't had the shot, but he had COVID, so he was saying he was inoculated. He was playing games. About the same time frame. So I was using the same strategy that he was using. And blood test came back negative. Didn't have it. So anyway, this brings me to the main topic. These two doctors in separate interviews. Now, Robert Malone's interview that I'm going to share is recent. It was this last week it came out. Peter McCullough's was back from, I don't know how far back. It was a long time ago. I want to say 2020, 2021. I can't remember how far back that one is. But if you just search for these, you'll find them. The Robert Malone one's easier to find. But Robert Malone was saying these same things back then. He's got 2 episodes on Rogan. And his one from before is pretty similar to this one. And I want to share with you 2 clips and how that relates to my situation and how I accidentally may have avoided COVID altogether. So this first clip is Robert Malone talking about what he did when he got COVID.
So I started taking some of those compounds, and one of them was this drug that is normally taken for stomach acid called famotidine. And I got an immediate response with that. And so I also tried isoquercetin. That didn't seem to make so much of an impact on me, but I experimented on myself. And the famotidine at higher doses now has been verified to be helpful.
So in that clip, he mentions famotidine. And at the time COVID started rolling out and people were getting COVID, I was fairly, I won't say new, but fairly new to the CPAP. And I had gotten off blood pressure medication, but I was still on my CPAP and was consistently using my CPAP. And one thing that was pretty common when I was overweight was certain foods would give me heartburn. Little Caesars, one of the worst for me. No hate. I love Little Caesars. In fact, I just had it 2 days ago. Love Little Caesars. But when I was overweight, eating their food would cause all kinds of indigestion, all kinds of heartburn, particularly overnight. And if you've ever had heartburn at night, it's already disturbing enough because you wake up kind of in a panic thinking you're going to throw up, but you're not. Add to that the pressure of a CPAP. Hey, I'm telling you right now, it's a situation. And that happened to me one time, and I started taking famotidine over the counter every single night. From that moment forward, for probably about, say, 2 years, I took famotidine. Right during the time that COVID was happening. And this was proven, according to Robert Malone, to be something that would beat COVID, take away the symptoms of COVID, be effective against COVID. The only other thing that I took at that time was a nasal spray, kind of basically it's off-brand Flonase, but Flucatocin, I think it's called. I'm not sure how to pronounce these things. And so I was taking every night famotidine, and every morning and evening I was taking the nasal spray. And those two things may have accidentally caused me to never get COVID and protected me from it. Now, I want to share with you the clip from Peter McCullough where he talks about nasal sprays and specifically what it does to COVID in the sinuses. So here's this clip. This was from, I don't have the episode number. No, I do. This was from episode 1747 of the Joe Rogan podcast.
Is actually using oral nasal virucidal therapy, far and away.
Yeah, explain that, please.
Yeah, oral nasal virucidal therapy is basically using, virtually anything kills the virus. Any disinfectant kills the virus. Iodine kills it on contact. So if we use dilute betadine, and so if you take a betadine over the counter, it's a brown bottle. We use it to sterilize wounds in the ER. Buy it at any pharmacy and take 2 teaspoons in 6 ounces of water. Take a nasal spray or a syringe bulb and spray it up your nose, snort it back to the points and back of your throat and spit it out. I'm sorry, that's gross for your audience, but you got to get it up there and back. That adequately decontaminates the nose. Then that in a randomized trial by Chowdhury and colleagues from Bangladesh, 303 patients randomized to this virucidal therapy, which is all topical. No prescription drugs, nothing else needed, versus a control group, which was just warm water. 303 patients in each group. It dramatically reduced the PCR positivity by day 3. It knocked it down from 303 down to 24 patients still positive. Those who got the control, they're still all positive. And it markedly reduced by easily 75% chances of having progressive disease, ending up the hospital.
So what he talks about there is nasal sprays, even something as simple as iodine, being able to kill the virus. He said almost anything kills the virus when it's in the sinuses. And basically what he's saying is after you're out for a long period of time and you come in contact with it, if you just cleanse that out initially, it won't have a chance to seed itself. And every day after work, and keep in mind I work nights, every morning I would come home from work, do my normal wrap up, eat, workout, rest, whatever. Use that Flucatocin, Flonase, and then I would take famotidine. When I woke up, before I went to work that evening, take Flucatocin, head to work, repeat over and over. And I did that extremely consistently back then. Now I don't do that as much because I don't get heartburn as much. So in a weird way, I kind of accidentally prevented COVID, I think, based on those two things alone. And those are the only two things that I took. And it perplexed me to no end because my wife got the vaccine. My children did not. And all of my children have tested positive for COVID at some point. They've all gotten COVID at some point. I have never tested positive. In fairness, I haven't tested for COVID all that much because I think the whole thing's ridiculous. But in a weird way, I may have accidentally saved myself from even coming into contact with COVID because of the regimen that I just naturally had myself on, attacking other symptoms that I was dealing with at the time. And so I just found that fascinating, and thinking about how the news cycle kind of washes old things away and brings you new things. This whole idea of, this news cycle's disappeared. Man, it's crazy to think back to the things we dealt with during COVID and what the science community tried to do, what the federal government tried to do, and how they've just kind of continued to do those things, but pretended that didn't happen. It's wild. It's one of the reasons that I searched Dr. Fauci's name in the Epstein files, because I was just like, it feels like there's something else was going on there. Now, he wasn't in there, there's that whole blank document thing. But the government is definitely up to no good. We'll say that much. And looking back at COVID and going through my mind of all the memories of COVID, it's surreal to think that it was even something that even happened. And it went on for years, and we survived it. But what we survived wasn't necessarily the COVID itself, but government overreach, mismanagement. There's so much negative activity from big business, pharmaceuticals, government, all that stuff. And it's still going on. They're still washing the news cycle. We're still seeing it. Can't say for sure what they're up to. Can never really understand it, if I'm being honest. But from an Uncredible perspective, in a weird way, just chasing my own symptoms, I accidentally, probably in the most uncredible way, prevented COVID in my own life. All right, now let's get into our podcast feature. This is a fun one. So this week I was like, man, I might not have a podcast feature because I hadn't really listened to any random podcasts. I hadn't come across any. Nothing had popped up. And because of that, this was probably Monday or Tuesday, I threw out, so Threads is like a spinoff of Instagram. It's sort of like Instagram's version of X, where instead of just pictures, it's text, and you can actually have social interaction. They're doing this I think it's a trial where they're using AI. I think it's AI. They're using algorithm or something, where you can type in, "Dear algorithm," or "Hey algorithm, connect me with," and then it'll change your feed based on that comment. And so I thought, you know what? I haven't run into podcasters. I would really love to connect people that I'm interacting with on Threads and Instagram and Substack and start merging those two groups of people. So I said, "Dear algorithm, connect me with people who have a Substack, podcast, this kind of thing." And only connected with like 4 or 5 people. But one of them was the host of this podcast. The podcast is called the Midpacker Podcast with Troy Meadows. And he has a Substack. I'll link all this stuff in the description. And the episode that I listened to was his episode 107 with Melissa Londry. And it was called Building Safe Trail Communities, Running 240 Miles, and Doing It All with Heart. Just a really, uncredible episode. Just regular people doing this. And Melissa's story was really cool to listen to. Kind of her journey in doing running and racing and then getting into the racing community and the leap of faith that she took to quit her job and start chasing this without even being sponsored and just becoming basically a runner. Just what she does is run. It's kind of a cool deal. By the way, let me just say this. I don't know why the algorithm keeps connecting me with ultra runners when I'm just trying to do my marathon stuff, but it seems like the algorithm wants me to run further. One of these days I will, but the idea of running 240 miles is crazy to me. But listening to this podcast, it's one that I'm going to put in my queue and pull up from time to time. But certainly worthy of the Uncredible feature this week. Great episode. I listened to it on my Thursday run, which was, it was yesterday's run. Yeah, I must have listened to this just yesterday. It's hard to believe. But one thing I wanted to mention is, and this has been coming out, a lot of the running podcasts that I listen to, they talk about the running community. And I can second all of what they say from a social media standpoint, where it's like, man, the running community is different than any other community on social media. But I have no idea what it's like in real life because I haven't really built a community. And so it's exciting to hear her talk about how she's got friends and people she runs with. I run alone. And I'm not sure that that's better, but for me and my mental state, and I know there's some people out there who do this as well, I appreciate these people who run together with their friends or their crew of sponsored people or whatever. But man, I lock in with my headphones and I just go. That's why I relate a lot to David Goggins, because he's just kind of like doing this thing on his own. And he has a team, but most of his focus is getting into your own mind and wrestling with your own challenges and your own pain and your own struggles. I can't imagine running with somebody and talking to them the whole time. Like, I just can't. Somehow that doesn't make sense to me. I'm sure it would be good. I can definitely relate to the idea of running with somebody in that community. just as an example, Thursday when I was running, beautiful day, by the way. We had 50-degree weather. I think I already mentioned that, but I'm running down towards the final leg of my 8-mile run. It's about 2 miles left at that point, and I saw a coworker pulling out of his driveway. And I will say this, him waving at me, recognizing me recognizing him, gave me a burst of energy. So I definitely relate to the whole community aspect of it. But being generally an introvert, in my own personal life, for me, running gives me that peace, that quiet, that calm. I appreciate the people who get community from it. And this episode is a great episode talking about that community. And if you're looking for community, the running community is a great place to go from what I hear. But I'm just doing this thing alone. And I appreciate the social media aspect of it and all of that. But for me, doing this, for me, the most stressful part of a race is the very beginning when I'm surrounded by people. Just not my scene. But I will say that it does seem to be a lot less criticism in this game than other things I've been a part of. So I'll just throw that out there. But a great episode 107 with Troy Meadows and Ultra Runner Melissa Londry. Great episode, worth checking out. All right, let's go ahead and close this out. We went a little long again, but that's okay. We'll just close out. Thanks for listening to the Uncredible Podcast. Remember to subscribe to the Substack. I've mentioned it a lot. I don't think I mentioned the link too much. Uncredible.me. That's where you're going to get all the articles, all the podcasts, most of the social media posts. That's the place to go. Get the app. Follow the Uncredible. I think it's either Uncredible or me. Follow it. Subscribe. Get it in your email. All that stuff. If you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, please take the time to like and subscribe. Like the episode, subscribe to it as well, so you get the updates every week. By the way, if you're on YouTube, I do share shorts, which is basically short sections of the episode, and I'm going to start probably in the next couple of weeks clipping out scenes from each episode. So we have these segments that we go through, and I think I'm going to start creating libraries of just those scenes. So some people might not want to listen to the whole episode, but they're interested in just the news aspect or just the main topic, or maybe you just want the podcast feature. I want to start breaking all those out from each episode and sharing those in a separate library that you can just go through. So check those out too, and like those videos as well. And those might be easier to share if you're sharing the episode. So like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. I wanted to put this on screen too before we wrap up. Merch.uncredible.me. A lot of great stuff on there. I know I've mentioned that I'm going to be getting a podcast specific shirt. I am working on that. I have the image ready. I have to blow it up. And then I have to blow the image up so that it's the right scale, and then work it back down to the size that Redbubble wants, and then link it to stickers, shirts, and things like that. But in the meantime, this is like a image of what a lot of these things are going to look like. So some of the products that you can already get, if you just change some colors, the logos are already on there. I think I've got 7 or 8 logos right now on Redbubble, but the easiest way to get there is to go to merch.uncredible.me. I'm wearing today, this is my favorite shirt. I did not expect it to be my favorite shirt, but this is my favorite shirt of the ones that I have. It came out so good. I couldn't believe how good it came out. And I use the athletic fit. It's a pretty expensive t-shirt for what it is, but I have 3 shirts like this, and I've been running in them, doing long runs in them for, I think I'm going on 6 months now since I bought these items, and they're all holding up well. I did notice one of my shirts is starting to maybe start to wear ever so slightly, but not bad. But yeah, those ones are holding up great. So check out the merch if you're a t-shirt person. If you're not into that type of stuff, there's stickers, there's clocks, there's all kinds of stuff that the logo can be thrown on, water bottles, all kinds of stuff. So check it out, merch.uncredible.me. And if you're a Facebook meta type person, if you're on Threads, Instagram, that kind of thing, check me out at Jeremy Lundmark. And yeah, that's it. Everybody, remain uncredible. We'll see you next week.